What's up, everybody? John Hoover, AllSooners.com. Big day for the Oklahoma Sooners today as Brent Venables has made it official. He has hired a new defensive coordinator, and as we all know, as we all expected, his name is Zac Alley. You already know Zac Alley is a young coach, 30 years old, and when he was hired a couple of years ago at Louisiana Monroe, he was the youngest defensive coordinator in all of FBS football. You also already know that Alley's pretty much a Venables clone, right? He worked with Venables for 7 years at Clemson as a student assistant, as a graduate assistant, and then last year he even told media in South Carolina before the Gamecocks played the Gamecocks. He told the media, I talk like Coach V and I coach like him. So an absolute Venables protege. Well, what else can we learn about Zac Alley? I'd like to start with his coaching influences other than Venables and Dabo Swinney at Clemson. These last 2 years, he coached for Rich Rodriguez at Jacksonville State, and before that, he was defensive coordinator for Terry Bowden at Louisiana Monroe. Before that, he was linebackers coach and special teams coordinator for Brian Harsin for 2 years at Boise State. And then before that, he was on Swinney's staff that won 2 national championships, right? So he's got the lineage. There's some really impressive coaching names there. So the next question is, how's his coaching? Well, Jacksonville State this year went 9-4, first full season reclassifying to FBS. And the strength of the team, the strength of the Gamecocks that this year was their defense. Zac Alley's defense gave up just 21.2 points per game, which is tied for 32nd in the nation. So not bad. They allowed just 111.5 yards per game on the ground, which ranks 14th nationally in run defense. They did give up 241 yards per game passing, which is not good, 95th in the country, in fact, but Alley's defense produced a lot of big plays. They had 25 takeaways, which is tied for 8th nationally. They were tied for 9th in the country with 16 interceptions. They were tied for 12th in the country in sacks, 2.92 per game. They were number 17 in tackles for loss at 7.1 per game. So they make a lot of big plays. They make a lot of things happen. They were 22nd in third down conversion defense, just 32.7%. And they were 33rd nationally in pass efficiency defense with a rating of 123.65. So overall, Jacksonville State's defense gave up 352 yards, 352.8 per game, which ranked 42nd in the country. How would you like some advanced statistics? How about this? Well, points per play, right? Jacksonville State ranked 22nd in the country in points per play, just 0.292 per play. Points per play. Yards per point, 16.1. That's 26th nationally. Yards per play allowed, that's 13th nationally. 4.7 yards per play. So that's not bad at all. Now, let's call it what it is here. Jacksonville State plays in Conference USA. They recently reclassified from FCS. Their strength of schedule this year was 112th in the nation. So, jumping up to Oklahoma, jumping up to the SEC in 2024. It's going to be a little bit different for Zac Alley. I promise you guys, you're going to hear a lot of football is football, right? But is it really when you're jumping from ULM and JSU to the SEC? Alley's going to be scheming against some of the best head coaches and offensive coordinators in the country, guys who are very, very good at what they do, are paid very well to do what they do. And think about this. The pressure of coaching in front of 100,000 is going to be a little different, a little higher than the 18,000 folks that come to games in Jacksonville, Alabama, right? So now this season at Jacksonville State, the Gamecocks lost to the 4 best teams that they faced. That was Coastal Carolina, Liberty, South Carolina, and New Mexico State. Those were the 4 best teams, and they lost all 4. But again, their defense was pretty good. They only give up 3.2 yards per rush in those 4 games against 4 pretty good teams. Alley himself was born in Spartanburg, South Carolina. He was raised in Greenville, South Carolina, attended high school in Charlotte, North Carolina, country day school. After high school, he joined Dabo's staff as a student assistant, and he was a grad assistant for 4 years. After that, he's been on a fast track ever since. As for speaking of fast tracks, right? As for how this all seemed to move so quickly, I think Venables explained it in his press release. OU's defense wasn't good last year, right? A lot like Jacksonville State, the Sooners produced a lot of impact plays, like interceptions, tackles for loss. But they also gave up a lot of yards and big plays in the passing game. Ultimately, they couldn't get stops in the fourth quarter at Kansas State and at Oklahoma State, and then you saw it up again in the bowl game against Arizona. After the bowl game, which ended with another long touchdown drive late in the game, fourth quarter, Venables made the decision to replace Ted Roof. Now, this is Venables' quote. Venables said in the press release, "I told him, Ted Roof, Wednesday that I made a decision to go in a new direction at defensive coordinator and offered him an opportunity to remain on our staff in a different role. He explained that he has a deep desire to keep coaching and will look to do that at a different school," end quote. So the different direction he wanted to go, Venables, was Zac Alley. He wanted to hire Zac Alley as his defensive coordinator. Roof didn't want that. Roof didn't want to sit by as a analyst or something like that. But Venables basically made sure he had his guy locked up last week, long before he went to Roof and said, "I'd like for you to take a demotion." But Roof didn't want the demotion, so he got fired. And let's give Venables credit here. The system that he put together in his first 2 years defensively, for Brent Venables standards I'm talking about, it wasn't working out. And he made a move to fix it. But now, think about it, it's vitally important that Venables cut the strings and let Zac Alley coach the defense. Venables told us last year that he runs the defensive meetings during the week. When's he got time to be a head coach if he's doing that? Roof told us this year Venables has all the input he wants on game days. So that extra involvement as the Sooners' kind of de facto defensive coordinator was ultimately to Oklahoma's detriment. This program is a mammoth undertaking. OU needs its head coach to be a head coach, not a default defensive coordinator. Venables needs to have oversight on the offense and the defense, as well as the special teams. He needs to be the CEO that he was hired to be and not spend his game days roaming up and down the sidelines talking to defensive guys, trying to dial up a blitz in the B-gap while the operation goes sideways. I say that. Remember those 2 sideline penalties in Lawrence and Stillwater? One was actually on Venables, but they ultimately both fall on the head coach. So this is a big moment for Venables, and it's a big moment for Oklahoma football. The SEC is, think about it, it's unforgiving. Those guys will exploit every weakness. So turning the defense over to Zac Alley, if that's what Venables ultimately does, he should, then that's a big boy decision for Oklahoma's head coach. I'm John Hoover. For more on Zac Alley and OU football, keep it right here at allsooners.com.